The silence in the emergency room at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, was violently shattered. The automatic doors whooshed open, and a hulking man, his button-down shirt spattered with dried blood, stormed in, carrying a semi-conscious woman in his arms. The staff's eyes immediately locked onto the disturbing sight. It wasn't the first time someone had arrived like this, but there was something about this scene that sent a chill straight down their spines. "I need some help!" the man yelled, his voice raw and thick with forced panic, his body trembling with sweat. "My wife fell down the stairs." The woman in his arms, Zola Amari Jenkins, had a fractured look on her face. Her natural hair was matted, her lips were split, and her arms hung limply, marked by dark, deep bruises, some fresh, some clearly healing. What caught the attention of the triage nurse, a veteran named Ms. Davis, was the way Zola avoided looking at anyone. It was as if the weight of the world was resting on her shoulders, as if asking for help might actually kill her. Zola was 29 years old, and if anyone looked closely enough, they could read the history written across her body. It was a story of silenced agony, of invisible wounds that never showed up on an X-ray. Only this time, there was something different in her eyes, a void so profound it screamed for someone to listen, even as her voice dared not make a sound. The man carrying her was Kofi Jide Okoro, tall with a booming voice and an intimidating presence. His hands, which claimed to hold her with tenderness, showed tiny traces of blood underneath his fingernails. When the medical staff tried to take control of the situation, he remained close, too close. "I found her at the bottom of the flight," he said, sounding impatient. "She hits her head sometimes. You know, she's clumsy like that." Dr. Imani Jones, who had just stepped out of surgery, approached after hearing the commotion. With almost 20 years of experience at Grady, she had developed a sixth sense for recognizing what wasn't being spoken. Seeing Zola, she knew this battered body was not the result of a simple fall. "Let's move her to Trauma 1, she ordered, her voice firm. "We need X-rays, a head CT scan, and a full panel of labs." Kofi tried to follow them into the restricted area, but was politely, though falsely, stopped by the male nurse, Elijah Eli Cole. "We apologize, sir. Hospital procedure. You'll have to wait out here." "But she's my wife!" "Precisely," Eli said, maintaining his calm, even smile. "We need space to work without distractions." As the gurney turned the corner toward the trauma bay, Zola slowly turned her head and looked directly at Eli for the first time. It was a mere instant, but in that second, something silent was conveyed. It wasn't a plea, it was a testament. "Can you move just a little for us?" Eli asked gently as they settled her onto the exam table. She nodded barely. During the examination, the silence in the room was so thick it felt painful. Dr. Jones clinically assessed every part of Zola's body, not letting the horror show on her face. Broken ribs, a fractured ulna, circular-shaped burns, like from a hot spoon, scars across her back as if made by a belt buckle, and an old, untreated fracture in her jawbone. "This is not recent," the doctor quietly told Eli. "This has been going on for years." Eli swallowed hard. He knew it already, but hearing it confirmed by the doctor made it all too real. As he cleaned a laceration on Zola's eyebrow, he spoke in the softest voice he could muster. "Does it hurt a lot?" "Not as much as other days," she whispered, without opening her eyes. Eli felt something break inside him, and he knew they had to act now. Meanwhile, Kofi paced the waiting room, walking in circles. He demanded updates, checked his watch impatiently, talked on his cell phone, pretending to be concerned. But in his eyes, a glint of chilling control never faded. When Dr. Jones came out to speak with him, her words were measured. "She's going to be in observation for a few hours. There are some injuries that concern us." "Can I see her now?" "No. She needs to rest." Kofi frowned, his fists clenching, but he said nothing. At that moment, the doctor gave a discreet signal to Tasha Williams, the hospital social worker, who had already been briefed. Tasha approached the observation room, sat by Zola's bedside, and spoke without rushing. "Hey, Zola, I just want you to know you're safe here. Nobody can hurt you." Zola didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on a dead spot on the ceiling. But when Tasha mentioned the word shelter, a silent tear slid down Zola's cheek. "You don't have to decide anything today," Tasha continued. "Just know that there's a way out, that this is not what you deserve." Eli watched from the doorway. He had never seen a silent tear convey so much. That night, as the hospital settled into its nocturnal rhythm of low lights and soft footsteps, Kofi tried to enter the room again. He wore a dark hoodie and walked stealthily, but someone had anticipated his intentions. "What are you doing here?" Eli asked, meeting him halfway down the hall. "I want to see my wife," Kofi hissed through gritted teeth. "You're not authorized." "I told you, she's my wife." "As of this moment, you cannot come any closer." Two security guards instantly appeared behind Eli, and behind them, Assistant District Attorney, ADA, Keisha Grant stood, a folder in her hand and an expression that cut through the air. "Kofi Okoro," she stated firmly, "there is an active restraining order against you. Please come with me." Kofi took a step back, trying to talk, to justify himself, to feign surprise, but his act wasn't working anymore. "Y'all don't know who you're messing with," he growled as they handcuffed him. "She's sick. I'm the one who takes care of her." His shouts echoed down the hallway. In her room, Zola opened her eyes for the first time since she was brought in. She didn't ask what was happening. She simply closed her eyelids and let out a long sigh, as if she could finally breathe freely. Eli came in shortly after, placed a fresh blanket over her, and checked her vitals. "He's out," he told her. "Really out. And he's not coming back." Zola pressed her lips together, as if speaking were still too dangerous, but this time she didn't fall back asleep with a frown. At dawn, Tasha returned, bringing a cup of chamomile tea and sitting down next to her. "Would you like us to notify anyone? Your family? A friend?" Zola hesitated. Every question seemed to open a door with ghosts hiding behind it. "My sister Nia, she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. We haven't spoken in years." "Do you want us to contact her?" "Yes, but don't tell her everything yet." Tasha nodded. There was no need to pressure her. Before Tasha left, Zola looked out the window. Outside, the sky was turning a pale, hazy blue, the city indifferent to her pain. But in that corner of the hospital, something had fundamentally changed. "What if this time I can actually leave?" she whispered. No one answered, but for the first time, the question didn't sound absurd. The room filled with light, and though the wounds were still there, something new began to stir. The small, fragile possibility of starting over. The echo of the guard's footsteps still lingered in the hospital hallways when Zola awoke from the longest sleep she'd had in weeks. Sleeping without fear felt strange, almost guilty. For the first time in years, the morning didn't arrive with screams, slammed doors, or insults disguised as affection. The soft light filtering through the blinds didn't burn, it caressed. The silence wasn't a threat, it was comfort. Eli entered with a breakfast tray, moving quietly. Zola looked at him and offered a faint smile, one of those that doesn't come from happiness, but from recognition. He approached calmly, as if knowing that any sudden movement could unleash a storm inside her. "Did you get some rest?" he asked, not expecting an enthusiastic reply. "I think so, though I'm not sure if it was sleep or passing out," Zola said, her voice raspy. "The important thing is that you're here, and he's not." She looked down, as if that he still occupied a corner of the room. Eli didn't press. He left the tray and walked out. Minutes later, Tasha Williams appeared in the doorway. Her presence carried an energy that didn't impose itself, but couldn't be ignored. She sat at the foot of the bed without notebooks or files, just her and her willingness to listen. "Can I stay a while?" Zola nodded. Tasha waited a moment, then spoke. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here." Zola swallowed. The air in her throat felt like a mouthful of crushed glass. Her eyes searched for something on the ceiling, as if the words would be easier to find up there. Then she spoke. "The first hits were an accident, or so he said. He shoved me when we were arguing over a bill. He apologized all night. He cried. He bought me a new phone. He told me he did it because he loved me, that he was protecting me, that I wouldn't know how to live without him. I believed him." Tasha didn't interrupt her once. Then he started checking my texts, telling me who I could talk to. He deleted my social media. When my best friend tried to visit, he yelled at her that I wasn't interested. I cut everyone off, my mother, my sister, myself. And once I had nobody left, he beat me like I was his punching bag. Tears streamed down unbidden. They weren't tears of sadness. They were of pent-up outrage. "I used to think I deserved it," she blurted out, as if confessing a crime. Tasha moved closer and gently took her hand. "What do you think now?" Zola took a deep breath, as if learning how to do it for the first time. "I think if I stay, I won't live." In another part of the hospital, ADA Keisha Grant reviewed the documents, her brow furrowed. Her desk was covered with copies of X-rays, photographs of injuries, medical testimonies, and police reports. The evidence was solid, but she knew the real challenge would be facing Kofi, a man with connections, emotional manipulation skills, and enough ego to believe he was untouchable. "He might get bail," she muttered, marking key pieces of evidence with a red pen. "If he gets back out on the street, he won't give her another chance." She requested Zola's psychiatric assessment, the social worker's protection report, and the doctor's statements. She drafted a formal petition to the judge for preventative detention, citing flight risk and danger to the victim. Zola's name appeared in bold on every report. Keisha knew she couldn't fail. That same day, a visitor arrived at the hospital, Nia Jenkins, Zola's sister. She had driven from Charlotte, North Carolina, her heart lodged in her throat. The last time she'd talked to Zola was 2 years ago, when her sister abruptly cut off all contact. She never understood why, until now. Tasha received her. "We don't want to overwhelm her, but I think your presence might help more than any medicine," she said as they walked down the hall. When Nia entered the room, Zola froze. She didn't know whether to smile, cry, yell at her for taking so long, or beg forgiveness for pushing her away. She did none of those things. She just opened her arms, and Nia ran to hug her, as if time had never passed. "I'm sorry I let you go," Nia sobbed. "I'm sorry I didn't ask for help," Zola whispered. The embrace lasted longer than many relationships. It was an emotional suture over a wound that had been open for years. When they finally separated, Zola seemed taller, more whole. Nia wiped her sister's tears with her hands, just like they used to do as children. "Mom and Dad are fine. They found out yesterday. They want to come. They're worried and they're mad. At me, at him, and at themselves for not seeing anything." News of Kofi's arrest circulated in the local Atlanta media. The headline was cold. "Man accused of domestic violence in Fulton County faces legal proceedings." But in the end, that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that Zola was no longer alone. 2 days later, Zola was discharged. She left in a wheelchair, escorted by 2 police officers, Tasha and her sister. Outside, an unmarked vehicle awaited her. It belonged to the shelter, a place with reinforced windows, security cameras, and a team of women who knew exactly how to heal the invisible. There, she met Aaliyah. Aaliyah was 16, slender, quiet, with a sharp gaze. She had been at the shelter for 6 months after escaping her stepfather, a man who didn't just hit her. Aaliyah's silence was different from Zola's. It wasn't fear. It was contained fury. One night, as they were having dinner, Zola saw Aaliyah standing apart, looking out the window. Zola approached without intending to speak, but Aaliyah spoke first. "You thought it was your fault, too?" Zola looked at her in silence, then nodded. "Sometimes I still do." "Me too," Aaliyah said, "but not anymore." The two shared that moment without saying more. Zola felt something move inside her, something akin to hope. In the following weeks, the tension rose. Kofi, from jail, managed to smuggle out 2 threatening letters. The first read, "You're misbehaving, but I still love you." The second was worse. "Don't think being locked up stops me. I know where you are. You're not as protected as you think." This raised an alarm at the shelter. Someone was leaking information. It could be a guard, a disloyal worker, or a contact within the system itself. Keisha Grant requested an internal investigation. Meanwhile, the shelter reinforced its protocols. Zola had to change rooms, routines, and habits. The fear returned, but this time it was accompanied by something new. Rage. "I'm not scared of him anymore," she told Tasha. "Now all I have is courage." Tasha proposed something. Formally declare everything before a judge. Every detail, every blow, every word. Zola hesitated. Reliving it hurt. But she also understood it was the only way to truly bury Kofi outside of her life, and not just in a cell. Days later, she walked into the courtroom. She wore a white blouse and a borrowed blazer. She walked with her head held high. Keisha was at her side. The judge, serious, read her name. Zola took a breath and began to speak. She described how he forced her to use makeup to hide the bruises, how he turned off her phone so she couldn't call her mother, how he forced her to quit her job to take care of her, how he locked her up for 3 days once because she went out without telling him. Every word was a brick in a tower of pain that had been hidden for far too long. When she finished, the judge nodded gravely. The room fell silent. Outside, Zola cried as if something was finally leaving her body. Tasha hugged her. "Today was the beginning," she said. "You are no longer under his rules." The case moved forward. Kofi was charged with aggravated assault, domestic violence, and making terroristic threats. His attempt to secure bail was denied. The evidence was overwhelming. The letters, the testimony, the medical reports, everything fit. Zola returned to the shelter feeling lighter. She knew the fear wouldn't vanish completely, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't letting it make her decisions. In her room, in front of the mirror, she gathered her hair. She studied her face. The scars were still there, but they were no longer marks of shame. They were the map of her survival. That night, while the others slept, Aaliyah approached her with a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you something," she said without looking up, "because if you could do it, I can too." It was a short poem, painful and beautiful. Zola read it, then hugged her without a word, and in that moment, she knew. Scars are not meant to be hidden. They become flags. 2 days later, the Fulton County Courthouse was packed. The murmuring of the public was a barely contained buzz, like a swarm of expectations floating above the wooden benches. Outside, the press huddled, anxious to capture a photo, a quote, a face that would justify the headlines they were already drafting. Domestic violence trial shakes Atlanta. Zola Amari Jenkins was behind an oak door, her hands cold and her heart pounding like a war drum. She was 29 years old, and though that number said little, her body had lived a lifetime of blows, silences, and accumulated fear. In front of the mirror, she had rehearsed what she would say, but she knew the words wouldn't come out the same way on the stand. Beside her, Tasha held her hand. Her sister, Nia, adjusted her hair, just like when they were girls. Behind them, a group of women from the shelter, including Aaliyah, offered their presence as a shield. They weren't there out of protocol. They were there out of love. Judge Martha Valencia presided over the court, a woman with a severe face and eyes that didn't blink without reason. She wasn't known for compassion, but she was known for fairness, and that was enough. To one side of the stand, Kofi Okoro waited, his handcuffs concealed under the table, wearing a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had lost weight, and the suit he wore was wrinkled, yet his gaze was still that of a man who believed he had lost nothing, as if the world still owed him something. When the clerk called Zola's name, the courtroom fell silent. She walked slowly toward the stand. She didn't tremble with fear. She trembled with memory. Each step made her more conscious of where she was and everything she had left behind to get there. "Full name," the judge said. "Zola Amari Jenkins. Age 29. You may begin your statement." Zola took a breath. She looked straight ahead. She didn't look at him, never at him. "For 6 years, I lived with the man sitting right there. The first few months were normal. At least I thought so. He told me he loved me, that he protected me. He isolated me from my friends, from my family, from myself. The first time he hit me, he cried and begged for forgiveness. He brought me flowers. He promised it would never happen again. He did it again 2 weeks later." Zola's voice didn't crack. It held a steadiness she didn't recognize in herself. "I wasn't an immediate victim. I became one little by little. I stayed when he yelled at me. I stayed when he locked me inside. I stayed when he cracked my rib. I thought it was my fault. I thought I provoked him. I looked at the judge, then at the people in the benches until I got to the hospital, and they looked at me like I deserved something better. They asked me if I was hurting, and I answered, 'Not as much as other days.' It was the first time I heard myself speak the truth." Keisha Grant, the ADA, presented the evidence. Photographs of the injuries, the medical reports, the threatening letters from jail, the testimonies of Dr. Imani Jones, nurse Eli Cole, and social worker Tasha Williams. Every word matched. Every image hurt. Dr. Jones was clear. There is no physical way those fractures were caused by a fall. They are the result of prolonged, repeated aggression. Eli spoke of finding her on the gurney, her body defeated but her eyes pleading for help. Tasha recounted the emotional process, the fears, the sleepless nights, the trembling at any loud sound. Then, something unexpected happened. Keisha Grant requested permission to present an unannounced witness. The judge raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "We call Aaliyah to the stand." Aaliyah, a slender teenager with dark hair, walked to the front. She wore modest clothes, but her steps were firm. Zola stood motionless. She hadn't expected this. Aaliyah stood before the microphone. Her voice was deeper than her age suggested. "I didn't know Zola before the shelter. I got there because my stepfather had been touching me since I was 12. My mom didn't believe me. I thought about going back to him. I thought maybe I should just die. Until I saw Zola." She paused, swallowing. The next words broke the atmosphere like glass. "And she taught me I'm not a lost cause. If she could walk out of the fear, I could too. I don't know if that helps this trial, but for me, she's the reason I'm still alive." The judge said nothing, merely adjusted her glasses. At that moment, Kofi sprang up from his seat. "This is a circus!" he screamed with contained fury. "That girl doesn't even know me! That woman belongs to me!" Two officers immediately restrained him. The judge slammed her gavel. "Mr. Okoro, if you interrupt again, you will be removed from the courtroom." Kofi struggled, his mask shattering into pieces. There was no trace left of the charming man described on social media. What remained was real. It was monstrous. The hearing continued for hours. The defense tried to justify the injuries, alleging stress, misunderstandings, and household accidents. The judge didn't need much time to decide. At 6:47 in the evening, Judge Valencia delivered the sentence. "This court finds the defendant, Mr. Kofi Jide Okoro, guilty of the charges of domestic violence, aggravated assault, and making terroristic threats. He is hereby sentenced to a term of 8 years in state prison, with no right to reduction for conduct. Furthermore, a perpetual restraining order is decreed. He shall not approach the victim or her family within 1,600 feet, 500 meters, ever." Kofi shouted something as he was being escorted out, but no one was listening anymore. Zola left the courthouse with her head held high. The press was waiting outside. She made no statements. She simply took Naya's hand and walked toward the shelter vehicle. Inside the car, Tasha looked at her calmly. "And now? Now, I want to live." Days later, Tasha offered her something unexpected. "We want you to work with us as a peer counselor. The new women need someone who understands their fear. Someone like you." Zola accepted without hesitation, not out of heroism, but out of conviction. It was time to do something with everything she had lived through. She moved in with Naya to a small apartment in downtown Atlanta. They painted the walls a cheerful canary yellow, placed plants in every corner, and laughed like girls while picking out curtains. For the first time, they were building a home. Zola enrolled in a social work course at Georgia State University. She went every Tuesday and Thursday, took notes, spoke little, and listened a lot. One day she cut her hair. She hadn't touched it in years. Kofi always said he liked it long. Now she wore it shoulder length. Each fallen strand was a rejection of what no longer defined her. At the shelter, her presence was different. She wasn't just another survivor. She was a beacon. The new women looked at her intently. In her first group talk, she stood in front of them. She brought no notes. She just spoke. "I don't know what to tell you that won't hurt, but I do know that living with fear is not living. If you feel like you can't take it anymore, I understand. But I also know there is a place you can get to. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it hurts, sometimes you cry more than you laugh, but it exists." The women applauded. Some cried, others simply hugged her. On the last night of the month, Zola hosted a dinner at her new home. She invited Nia, her parents, Tasha, Eli, Dr. Jones, and Elia. She cooked gumbo, dirty rice, and a lemon pie. The table was long, the atmosphere warm. Nia's father, Mr. Jenkins, raised his glass. "To my daughter, who was born again without ceasing to be herself." Everyone toasted. Zola laughed, a clean, unashamed laugh, and in the middle of that dinner, she understood something she had been seeking for years. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about stopping carrying it like a life sentence. That night, before sleeping, she wrote in her journal, "I didn't heal. I rebuilt myself, and that is more valuable than any cure. Because sometimes, freedom doesn't arrive all at once, but step by step, until it finally stops hurting." Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.